And you're right, you can never sell health. And that's something we've talked about a lot on this podcast.
Anybody who says, I'm going to take the time to educate people with what I think I know is true is going to have an audience. Right?
Well, that's obviously why you're excelling in your field, because obviously it's your passion. And
300,000 women are going to die unnecessarily this year from heart disease.
People have their head in the sand until something happens, until they have that first heart attack or stroke or, hopefully something less extreme.
And we know how to stop people from dying. So somebody please explain to me, Mike, why are that many people dying every single year?
Well, welcome. We're back for another episode. Glad you guys are able to join us. Check us out on our video platforms and audio, wherever you're listening. Give us 5 stars. Give us that thumbs up. Give us a good rating, whatever it is. And make sure you subscribe. We always like to work with that algorithm and make sure we get our numbers up. So we appreciate your support and always having y'all continue to come back and check out what we're doing. Our guest today is a board-certified cardiologist. He has a clinic in Atlanta called the Prevent Clinic. He also has a PhD in physiology. He hosts the Good Doctor TV web series and the Health Mastery Cafe with Dr. Dave podcast. He previously served as the contributing health editor for Ebony Magazine and ebony.com. We are very excited to have with us today Dr. Dave Montgomery. Dave, thanks for being here.
Hey, Mike, it's a pleasure to be with you. I can't wait to jump into our conversation today.
Yeah, I was saying I love your set, man. I love your set. I got to step up my game now because I'm seeing how slick things look out there. So it looks really good. So appreciate that. And
no, I appreciate the feedback. Listen, I will tell you, it has nothing to do with me. I just do what people say now. Haven't done a podcast for a long time and it didn't go so well. I'm like, nope. I'm going to stay in my lane, which is over here being a doctor, and let the people who do this do it. So there you go.
Well, you're coming off like a pro, man. So just keep doing your thing.
All right.
But before we dive in, so you have an MD and a PhD. Like, that's a serious combination. You are not playing. Like, I can hardly sit through like a 2-hour workshop. How long did that take you to get?
So a long time, and I think, I get that question a fair amount. I don't know, what the real answer is, apart from it was destiny. I know that sounds very kind of,
I hear that.
Strange, but so it took a long time. So if we don't count undergrad, it was 4 years of medical school. If we don't count undergrad, it was actually, I did 4.5 years of a PhD first. So you say 4 years for PhD, 4 years for undergraduate medical education, medical school, and then 3 years as a resident. I was an internal medicine resident, board certified in internal medicine, before I then went to do a cardiology fellowship, which is another 3 years. And then I did an additional fellowship, kind of doing some research, PhD. I said, hey, let me keep going with research, because after all, that was my ultimate goal, to be an academic physician, if you will, researching and treating patients. So 15 years if you don't count undergrad.
That is commitment, man. That's wild. I commend you for that. I couldn't do it.
Well, I think it was just I was a glutton for the abuse and punishment that happens when you go through all that school. I don't know. Yeah. So there you go.
But you obviously got some serious drive to be making that happen. I mean, that's pretty wild. So I mean, what did you get first? The MD?
No, I went to grad school first.
Okay.
So my mentor in undergrad said, hey, listen, we've got these new programs that are out. They were called MSTP, and they were combining PhDs and medical degrees, and he thought that wasn't the way to go. He was a traditional guy. He said, I want you to get a real PhD, he said. And he had exposed me to the world of science. I had never really thought about it as a career. Kid from the south side of Chicago, nobody saying, hey, listen, you're going to be a scientist. Scientists, after all, Mike, were, guys with hair sticking up like this, and just, severely quirky. So I didn't ever see myself until I got to the bench and started really understanding at the forefront of understanding human biology and pathophysiology happens there. I love that, right? So when you say, hey, that was a lot of commitment, it really didn't feel like it, right? Because I think I was so jazzed about it, even as a young kid, that it was just having fun. I know it sounds weird, but that's exactly what it was. I was having fun all this time and decided to do the PhD first and then went to medical school.
Well, that's obviously why you're excelling in your field, because obviously it's your passion. And me just uttering the words that I could never do it, that just wouldn't be my passion. So
That's right.
it's absolutely destiny by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Now, you're a board certified MD, so you have to do boards every 10 years, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you get board certified every 10 years. They're changing the way the boards look because, obviously everything comes under question when people are looking at it carefully. But yeah, every 10 years you recertify. Throughout that time, you're, doing what they call CME, making sure you don't fall off the grid in terms of what's current. But yeah, every 10 years.
And how intense is that?
Intense, as intense as the first time.
Yeah.
It's a lot, right? I mean, just cardiology alone is such a massive field now. The more and more we understand about cardiology, the more we know that we've got to have people who subspecialize.
Yeah.
And there's just so much to know. When you take the boards, they want you to know a bit of all of it. And you're going back and pulling out the crates with your old notebooks and stuff. People don't use notebooks anymore now, but notebooks from stuff that you were reading as a first year fellow cardiology. So it's intense. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And you worked with Ebony Magazine before. What was that like?
Yeah, no, I had a great opportunity to do some writing. What I found a long time ago when I was in residency was that something was happening with the messaging, that conditions for which we know how to stop people from dying from, namely heart disease, far and away, Mike, the number one killer still in this country, compared to even all of the cancers combined. But here's the weird part about it. We know what causes it. We don't know what causes very many of the cancers. Think about it. And we know how to stop people from dying. So somebody please explain to me, Mike, why are that many people dying every single year? 300,000 women are going to die unnecessarily this year from heart disease. Mm-hmm. So something's wrong. What's wrong? The information gap. There is a public relations problem. We have a communications problem. Google doesn't have that problem. Instagram doesn't have it. Anyway, we have a public relations problem. It was clear to me that we weren't getting the vital information that me and my colleagues talk about ad nauseum at conferences, and we're doctor, and we're reciting it to each other, but that's not where it counts. It counts with you. It counts with society and getting it out there. And I was clear that we weren't getting that message out. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go into the place where you don't have to ask people to come. That's media. At the time, it was mass media. So I started in print and radio, and then I got into TV. So the print piece was ebony.com a little bit later, really being able to translate information in a way that people can consume it. Because after all, if you don't translate the language, it's not going to matter. Falls flat.
Yeah. So your work with Ebony Magazine, I guess that helped you build a national profile, right? Like that's a national magazine, international actually, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it was more about getting the information out than about notoriety. But yeah, I mean, people, saw the name Dr. Dave Montgomery. I think, what probably was more impactful for notoriety, because the messenger does matter, Mike. I mean, if you don't trust the person that's talking to you, we saw that big time with the COVID pandemic, then it doesn't matter what he's saying or she's saying. Yeah. And so to get out there and, just sort of show people, hey, kind of have some thoughts and ideas and get them to trust you like you should be doing with your doctor, right? Was important. So television was next. Cut my teeth at WGN, started doing live news where there's no retake, buddy. That's it. Whatever you just said, that's going out there. And really understanding live television. Then I started doing talk shows right there in Chicago with Steve Harvey, literally right down the street from my residency program. Wow. So I could just run down to NBC, film, and come back down and not get yelled at too much. I was yelled at. That's for sure. But that was it, right? How do we get to a platform where people are already there? It's really hard to tell people, hey, listen, hey, Mike, I got a great health fair for you. It's this weekend. Meet me there, 12 p.m. sharp. You're like, I'll see you there. Right? Yeah. No, nobody's going to that now. And I don't want to say that because there's some health fairs that are really well done and promoted well, but it's not getting to the masses of people that it belongs to. So here's what ends up happening: people go where the information is. And currently, that information is on social media. Anybody who says, I'm going to take the time to educate people with what I think I know is true is going to have an audience, right? Now, we can get a little bit into what the person's saying, but boy, they're just looking for somebody who's going to take the time and care about them.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right? And so I decided that I was going to be one of those a long time ago and try. I started an audio podcast back in 2011, right? Just trying to figure out what are the other avenues people are doing this in. And we're still going, man. We've got now a video podcast, the Health Mastery Cafe. Really pleased to say is doing well. We've got some fantastic guests. Would love to have you one day. But that's where the zeitgeist. I mean, not the zeitgeist, but that's where the hockey puck is going, right?
Yeah.
So there you go.
No, that's great that you're trying to raise awareness. And you're right, you can never sell health. And that's something we've talked about a lot on this podcast is people have their head in the sand until something happens, until they have that first heart attack or stroke or, hopefully something less extreme. But it's always that wake-up call that every human being needs before they take this stuff seriously. And kids feel great when they're in their teens and in their 20s, although like disease metrics are shifting from the research that I've looked at, and I'm sure you've probably seen the same thing, that young people are coming down with cancers and with, diabetes and these different issues that we didn't see 20 or 30 years ago. And so more people need these wake-up calls. So hats off to you for doing that work and trying to get the word out there. That's important.
Yeah, no, I think it is the only way that we're going to turn the tide is by making sure first that people are aware of things, that we disabuse them of beliefs, perceptions, misconceptions that are not serving them, and then give them strategy. Give me something to do. Don't just wag your finger at me, doctor. Tell me what to do next. That's where people are clamoring for. Tell me what to do. And don't say it, just say it in a language I can understand.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
definitely. And, speaking of telling people what to do, I want to talk about heart health from a natural perspective. So when you go to visit a cardiologist's office, they're quick to prescribe meds. Cardiac medications can be life-saving and, they're necessary in some cases, but there seems to be like a piece missing in healthcare today. How can we achieve more heart health naturally?
Well, so that's a really loaded question. So I'm happy we have long form to talk about it, and not 2 minutes on the news. Which is often what I have. 2 minutes. Oh, that's it. Oh, you guys shut up.
Right.
You can't disseminate information in 3-minute sound bites. It doesn't work. With that being said, that's complicated. So one of the reasons why I think many people have that same sentiment is because doctors have gotten into a habit of sticking and moving really quickly because of the demands on their time and whatever. You come into a room and listen for 2 or 3 minutes, and then boom, it's a prescription. It feels like all doctors want to do is prescribe medicine. And I want to give a different perspective. There are not very many modern physicians who want to do that. There is nobody who would put themselves through what I just told you I went through. Like, that was not like, although I was like geeked about it and I wanted to keep doing it, it's not like something you would, the drudgery and the, kind of going through some of the parts that you don't enjoy so that you can do the things that you do. Nobody does that just to start prescribing medicine. Nobody goes into medicine to do anything other than to end human suffering. Stop right there, period. But we don't tell. What if I got on a public service announcement and just said just like that, right? Nobody's going to spend. You know how much money we spend just to write your prescription? No, sir. That's not what it is. But we haven't figured out what to communicate. We have a public relations problem. Remember, that's what I said. Yeah. So, and it doesn't help that when you come in, you're not listened to. There's no relationship that lasts without being listened to, without being heard, right? You don't get it. And then you seem like you already got it figured out. You're just going to prescribe a medicine. There are some things that absolutely, that humans deal with, that humans suffer from, that we don't have a natural remedy to. It's the doctor's job to walk you through what those are, right? But it's more important for the doctor to educate you on why he or she is prescribing the medicine. One of the things, and this is our fault, one of the things is we don't think people are going to do what it takes to heal themselves. Our bodies, I learned as a physiologist, our bodies, the cell is designed to heal itself.
Right.
Now, and it sounds, oh, it's so great. No, like I was on the ground learning that, like right on the microscope. I'm telling you, the cell is an amazing entity. It is but you've got to give it the right environment. If you don't give the cell the right environment, if you don't give it the right tools and the keys, it's not going to do it. It's not going to heal itself. What doctors don't think is that people are going to eat the right foods, exercise, or move their body according to how their body should be moved, and do some of the other things like sleep well, right?
Yeah.
In order to reverse some of the conditions that can be reversed by just natural means, right? Just by taking food supplements or food itself, right? The number one medicine on the planet, right?
Yeah.
We don't think that people are going to do it because when we tell people to do it, well, they don't do it. And so our statistics are worsening when it comes to things that are lifestyle driven.
Right.
I take a different perspective from my colleagues on that, just as I'm trying to give everybody a different perspective of why doctors are doing what they're doing. I think that if I'm selling something and I don't make the sale, that it's not the client's responsibility. I talked about this with Dan Ariely. I had Dan Ariely on my podcast. We just shot the episode on Saturday. And I said this, publicly for the first time. I think that if somebody's trying to make a sale, it is up to the person who's selling to make the sale. I am selling to you as optimal health as you possibly can attain by doing these things. And if I haven't made the point, I got to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to say it to you so that you can buy it.
Yeah.
I find that when I connect with the person at their level, and remember, we're not talking about up or down. We're just talking about at their level. I'm translating, and we're talking the same language. We're on the same wavelength. That person changes what they think, and as a result, changes what they do, that in that order. We haven't sat down and said, oh, it's our responsibility to make sure that people buy what we're selling them because we don't think about it like that. So It's a perspective shift. But I do want to go back to what you're saying. I don't want people to think that I'm going to go to this doctor. And the reason why I don't want to go to this doctor is because I'm going to go with this problem I've been having for 6 months, and I know that she's going to give me a prescription.
Right.
It is up to us to also be stewards of our own health and ask as many questions as we possibly can. So I enjoy when patients have read before class, if you will, and they know a little bit about what we're talking about so we can at least elevate the conversation, talk about why what they read was right, wrong, or simply doesn't apply to them.
Yeah.
But that's a doctor, me, who sits down in a chair and has a long-form conversation with the patient about his or her questions. Now, I'm not on time because of that, but time is not working. That's how we've been doing it. That's not working, Mike. We can't factor that in. So when it comes to certain diseases, there's diseases we can name, ALS, certain blood cancers, genetic cholesterol, genetic forms of hypertension. Guess what? We can like scour the earth. We don't have anything that's readily available that can cure some of those things. And so people who have dedicated their lives to ending human suffering are at the bench, are at the bedside trying to say, how can we help you do this? And guess what? We got to use something outside of exercise and diet, especially if you're not doing that right. And if we would have an honest dialogue about responsibility and accountability, we could actually move past that part of distrust. The chasm of distrust is not for society to fill or to span, whatever the word is. It is for the purveyors of the information that they're trying to get across. Period. End of story.
You know what? I appreciate you offering that perspective. That's something that people on this side of the glass don't necessarily hear. So thank you for illuminating us with that. That's very helpful. I really like that you're somebody that wants the patient to do their homework. There are situations that I've been in personally, and many people I know, where that actually threatens the doctor. Because they're like, well, now you're questioning my authority, and you let me do the doctor stuff and you just do what I say. That's not a relationship. Some people yield to that, I find sometimes older patients just kind of do this God complex thing with the doctor, which I take issue with. And I've had to walk out of doctor's offices in the past. I have, just based on that, because I try to do my homework. I don't have, I don't have an MD, but there's nothing wrong with coming in informed. And if the information's not accurate, then you as the expert can correct it. That makes sense. But I just think more doctors need to have that perspective of what you have. There's a lack of that in some spaces. I hope that's changing.
Yeah, no, it's big. I wish I could say it was changing with the generational shift, and perhaps it is. It's big. I will tell you what I think about that. It doesn't mean that this is what it is for everybody, but I think in large part, many of those doctors feel like it's an ego bruise for you to go and read on the internet, Google, whatever it is, and then come in. And question what they're saying. It does matter how we say it, not what we say. But it's also important for physicians to back up and say, you know what? I think the guy's just scared.
Yeah.
Like somebody comes in all blustery and I just walk in. I'm a chipper kind of dude, man. When I walk in, I'm like jumping off the walls when it's appropriate, right? If somebody's passed away, you don't do that. But, and if somebody then responds with bluster and something's going on, we call it in my office a human moment. Give that person a moment to be a human being. They are scared and they don't know how to address it. That's their defense mechanism. Let me see if I can get into it. Remember, that's my job. So the ego is there and then time is there. So if you go and you read, I know that the amount of time that I'm going to spend in the room with you, Mike, is going to be longer. Guess what? I love that. People say, "Do you want to?" I'm sorry that I go to a party with my wife. She's in corporate real estate, so we go to this. There's no doctors necessarily there, and I'm there, and people say, "Oh, I'm sorry to talk shop, but blah 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 blah." I'm like, listen, that's like telling Michael Jordan, "Hey, sorry to throw your basketball and dribble around with you." Are you kidding me? Like, you don't have to ask somebody who is absolutely thrilled and jazzed by what they do every day to keep doing it. You see what I'm saying? So I like that. And I own my own practice. So guess who's going to get fired? Nobody. If I take as much time as I want to, I'm going to do it. Now, there is a such thing as not spending the next guy's time that's, wasting his time that's waiting for me. But it's ego and the amount of time that a doctor would have to spend to either, educate you properly, tell you how it applies, right? And those are the things like, God, I don't have time for this, whatever it is. But ego's probably the biggest one, Mike.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for commenting on that. So shifting gears a little bit, let's get into your expertise here. So what kind of foods support heart health? There's so much information out there. A lot of it's conflicting. People get confused. We hear a lot about saturated fat. This seems to be so controversial. Some docs say it's healthy, eat a lot of it. Other doctors say no. We had Dr. Dan Goodenow, who's a neuroscientist, on our podcast about a year ago, and he told us that saturated fat is probably the cleanest fuel source available to the human body. Is saturated fat good for us or not?
Well, so I want to give everybody, one of Dr. Day's rules that we've all heard of before, but I really want us to let it sink in. One size doesn't fit all.
Okay.
In any direction. It doesn't. And extremes should be taken with caution. If somebody is telling you to do something that says always or never, or is saying, leave, 100% leave something out, right? You've got to question it. I'm not saying that it's wrong. So, for example, having cyanide once a week in your tea is certifiably the wrong thing to do. So there are some things that we've got to go back to our thing and make, to our rule and make a corollary. There are clearly some really toxic things that you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
But there's also the one size doesn't fit all that I want people to adopt in their thinking. If there's a physician who we respect, it gives us some information. It doesn't matter how much we respect him or her. It may not, what they're saying may not apply to you. It may not be that you can take what they asked you to do or what they're suggesting and do it, because Everybody's different, and we're not just a blood type. We're not just a, cardiovascular system. We are these amazing composite amalgams of wonderment. And it is really wonderful what we do.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you want to help your brain health, but we're not just brains and central nervous systems walking around, right? You also are a metabolic endocrine system. You're an immunology, your immunology system, your cardiovascular, your GI system. Mm-hmm. What if, for example, kale? Let me do this, and I'll go back to the point. Kale. Mm-hmm. I love kale. If I said, what do you guys think of kale? People are like, kale is great. It's got some iron and some of the other phytonutrients in it. It's great. If Dave Montgomery eats too much kale, I wouldn't be able to be sitting here with you on this podcast. Just because it's healthy, just because it's good, doesn't mean it's for you. Mm-hmm. You see? So what do we have to do? You've got to take whatever it is and do the experiment. You've got to test it. As a scientist, I learned that really well. So saturated fat, let's go back to it. It is very clear what saturated fat does to your bloodstream. When you eat saturated fat, because fat, oil, and water, your blood, don't mix, oil and water don't mix, everybody knows it. In order to transport that fat around your body to do the different things that it does, fat helps you with nutrients, right? So it gives fuel. Fat helps make membranes and hormones and stuff. But in order to get it from your gut into the liver or to the brain or wherever else it's going to go to do its job, it's got to have an Uber ride. It's got to have a driver that's going to allow it to float around in this water because it's oil.
Yeah.
The kind of Uber driver that transports saturated fat is low density lipoprotein. It's LDL. What I know for certain is that the plaques that form in people's arteries that cause heart attacks and strokes and other things like kidney disease are made mostly of oxidized LDL. So it makes sense. The more LDLs I have, the more chance they can get oxidized. Remember, back in the day, say I'm 50 years old, but some of the people who are listening are being much younger, so they don't remember seeing cars rust. But we've all seen something rust, pliers or something, right?
Yeah.
That is an oxidation process. Imagine your cholesterol, which was perfectly fine, like the pliers, brand new, and then it gets oxidized and turns from that nice metal to rust. There is a similar process. LDL, there's nothing wrong with LDL. We're born with about 30 milligrams per deciliter of LDL. It's doing something. But when that LDL gets oxidized, it turns into a gremlin that was fed after midnight. And it is very aggressive. It starts to build plaque. The more LDL I have, the more chance I have to oxidize my LDL, particularly if I'm not doing the other things right. And the more chance I'm going to build plaque. So let's go back to it. If we know that LDL is the main constituent in the inside of plaques, and we know that saturated fat by definition has to increase if my saturated fat increases, then I want to know that for myself. Let me do it. Let me do a keto diet with a whole bunch of, fat, if somebody recommended that. Like, I'm not recommending that, by the way. Right? And there was a bulletproof coffee. You remember this? Put some butter in it, an espresso, right? It was a disaster. Yeah. And you drink that. I had a guy come this skinnier than me. I mean, this guy's rail thin, worked out all the time, right? He was a mountain biker. And LDL cholesterol was 114. That's just a little bit up from normal. 100 is normal by and large. He said, I did a keto diet. It was 356, Mike, 356. Now, let's stop right there. You don't have to believe in the LDL plaque story. But if your cholesterol, LDL only, goes up 3.5-fold or 3-fold, you are going to say, wait, that may not be the right thing to do. So this guy who was, for all intents and purposes, if anybody could do a keto diet with a bulletproof coffee, he could. He said, no matter how much energy I think I got, no matter how much, sharper I think I was, it's not worth me clogging up arteries. I cannot sustain this for some long time. So I want people to do that. So that's the lesson. If you're going to do something, make sure you get a baseline. That means get blood tests, get the anthropomorphic data. What's my weight? What's my, waist circumference? What's my height? You know what your height is. What's my blood pressure and heart rate? What's my blood levels of all the critical things? before you do the experiment and after, and go from there. That's the way to
Right.
do it.
Okay. So you talked about oxidation of those LDL particles. How do we prevent that from happening?
Yeah, right. Oxidation, the number one way to prevent oxidation is with antioxidants. So the best diet across the globe, if you go to the blue zones, you're going to see that the people in those blue zones eat a lot of plants. And they eat plants in their most natural state. I didn't say they have to be raw, but boy, they're pretty close to what they look like when I pulled them from the ground. Those are the people who have a lot of antioxidant capacity. So when we take a blood level called oxidized LDL, which you can do, it's like ultra low, right? The guy who then goes to do bulletproof coffee, take his oxidized LDL, and you'll see the difference. You're oxidizing more LDL because you have oxidative stress. When I take a fat molecule into a cell and have to break it down, I use more oxygen to do that. I use more oxygen, and when I use more oxygen, which is a really healthy, molecule, when I misuse it or overuse it, it becomes an reactive oxygen species. The reactive oxygen species is what causes the rust inside the body. That's what causes oxidation. So all of the plants across the board, I tell people to eat the rainbow. We've all heard that before, but I think it's fantastic because I get a smattering of all of the phytonutrients that make up the purple of an eggplant, that make up the orange of a carrot, that make up the red of a radish or a tomato. And I have a little bit of that every day. Here's the added benefit is if you eat the rainbow, first of all, the rainbow's not going to come from meat. The rainbow's going to be in the plant kingdom. There's no yellow, you don't have all those, although you get creative. Once you eat that, you're not going to be hungry. So people think, oh, I eat a bunch of plants. What am I going to eat? Where's my protein going to come from? Well, all of that is not true. And we can go into nature and see that it's not true. A gorilla, even a female gorilla. Boom. You ever seen a female? Of course you have. Everybody's seen a female gorilla. Guess what? Has she ever eaten a salmon? No. Has she ever wanted? You go take a female gorilla, scrambled eggs, and you run for your life as fast as you can. She's not gonna eat it, right?
Yeah.
What does she eat? Plants. And yeah, we have this cartoon in our head about bananas, but if she has them available, that's what she's eating, and she has no protein problem. A horse does not want chicken breast. It's not gonna eat it. Beware. If you give a horse chicken breast, don't stand behind it. It's going to kick you in the chest. Your life might be over. It eats oats and hay and grass. The big rump on the back of a horse is all protein. The horse doesn't have protein problem. So now we start to, disabuse ourselves of the fallacies and the misconceptions, and we get healthier and healthier. Plant-centric, to end that story, Mike, is what I say. Eat a plant-centric diet. Plan your meals around the plants, the vegetables and fruits and grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes that you're going to eat. Bring whatever lean protein in after you plan that. That's how to do it.
Is there a percentage breakdown? I know you said not everybody's the same, but what do you typically tell patients when it comes to the animal proteins?
Yeah. So, for example, this month I'm not eating any animal protein. I myself in May and June do a vegan kind of pilgrimage, if you will. And that's
every year you do that?
Every year, May and June, yeah. So I don't have a percentage. When it breaks down to things like that, I do send you to an expert because I didn't go and study macronutrients and all that stuff. So I send you to really good registered dietitians. That's what I do. And there are going to be some people who should have more animal protein. For example, somebody who's training for an ultra marathon. Boy, we got to figure out a way to keep your protein levels up so that we can keep your muscle strong. There are people who are lifting weights or in competitions and other conditions, for example, that can't have a bunch of vegetables. Again, the GI tract is the number one reason why people can't eat plant-based diets. So you got to figure it out for them. How do you get that percentage? And I would say I punt that over to the expert.
So you said the GI tract. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, just like I was saying about kale, my GI tract says there's a limit to the amount of kale you can eat, or you'll be doubled over in abdominal pain, right? And you won't be able to go to the family picnic. There are some people who have other chronic GI problems. The lower GI in particular, like the inflammatory bowel diseases, Crohn's, IBS is one, right?
Yeah.
There are different ones. Ulcerative colitis is another. There are different ones, and they have to be really careful. So if somebody with Crohn's, when they eat carrots and spinach and kale and eggplant and all of that, they get stomach pain. My recommendation is that you don't eat any of those things. You have to find the plants that agree with you, doing the experiment, and then leverage those. Those people have to, by definition, and if they're going to get nutrient density, they have to eat more animal meat. The animal meat that you eat should not be processed. The WHO is really clear about processed meat. It is not probably a carcinogen, definitely a carcinogen because of the nitrates that we put in them. So we got to figure out a natural, lean protein way from an animal source to get people fed.
So you spoke on processed foods, processed meat, but I wanted to get into processed foods in general. There's, they're everywhere. They're ubiquitous in the standard American diet today. Do you think that excessive processed foods play a role in heart disease?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Not just heart disease, but obesity, the increase in the certain cancers that we're seeing. It's really clear what happens when you eat the processed foods inside your body. A number of things change. Your inflammatory markers go up because your immune system gets involved and saying, what in the world is this stuff that just came into the bloodstream? Go get them, right? Immune system is almost like the military with different branches, and so you send the different ones. So the immune inflammatory signals go up. People's insulin sensitivity goes down. That's the opposite of diabetes, right? So insulin resistance is the beginning of diabetes. You can have clotting factors, right? And all of those things increase with obesity, which is why obesity, for example, is not a beauty contest when we say, hey, let's try to get you to lose weight. Because even if you don't have any of the classic features of risk, like high blood pressure or high cholesterol, we know that a larger amount of fat mass, particularly around the midsection and in the midsection, the visceral fat, increases your inflammatory markers, your risk of clotting, because clotting factors go up, particularly one that I study called PI1, interferons, interleukins, like all of this stuff goes up, that when you start to lose weight, it goes down. And those markers are on the ground. That's zooming all the way in. What causes heart disease? Inflammation around a blood vessel causes the floor of the blood vessel to come up. Oxidized LDL swimming around goes in. If oxidized LDL goes in, a whole process of healing starts. The body tries to, protect itself, and you start getting what we call an atheroma or a plaque, an atherosclerotic plaque. That's cholesterol.
Yeah.
So in order to stop all of that, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning. Every effect has a cause, and the cause was the increase in the inflammation, clotting factors, and those other things that affect the blood vessel. If we could stop those with diet, we can, then we can stop the disease.
Yeah. So processed food also is almost always invariably like super high in carbs, right? It's like a carbohydrate overdose when people are eating those. And that leads to, you tell me if I'm wrong, blood sugar issues. If people are eating that excessively, their A1C goes up, they start getting pre-diabetic, and diabetes numbers are through the roof right now. Talk about the connection between diabetes and heart disease.
Yeah, I mean, there is an inextricable link. So that to the point that decades ago, cardiologists started calling diabetes a risk equivalent. In other words, having uncontrolled diabetes is not if you're going to get heart disease, when you're going to get heart disease. So we started a long time ago treating people with uncontrolled diabetes with all of the weapons that we have in the arsenal. Give them a statin, give them this, to try to prevent them, because it's almost a given that if your diabetes is uncontrolled, that you will start that process that I talked about in that blood vessel. Once that starts, hard to stop if you're going to be doing the same thing. So it's
wow. How about sodium? It's all linked to this processed food conversation, but high sodium, we're eating it everywhere. I ate at a restaurant last night with my family, really enjoyed it, but I didn't even want to check the sodium levels because I knew they'd be through the roof. Do you think excessive sodium leads to heart problems as well, particularly like electrolyte imbalances?
Well, so I'm not sure about the electrolyte imbalances. It is a really complex world when we bring one solute in over the other one. And sodium is one of the banes of a medical student's existence to try to understand the biochemistry there. So that in a nutshell. With that being said, we'll go back to it. It does depend on the context. So there are regions in the world where 4, 5 grams of sodium does not lead to hypertension or heart disease. And those are Asian, countries, for example, that have a different set of genes, and they can eat a lot of sodium, and it might be healthier for them than other places. Well, you take that same 4, 5, 6 grams of sodium and you put it square in the middle of the United States of America, and you've got a problem. So there is something to say about genes, and one size doesn't fit all. Okay? With that being said, most Americans should not partake in that much sodium. And the Americans who live the longest, if you look at their diets, they have the least. We can't compare ourselves, to Okinawa, Japan, and that we can't do it because there are some important differences there. So I tell people, if you're eating a plant-centric, mostly plants, centric diet with the plants in their most natural state, not raw, but in their most natural state, and you don't add a bunch of sodium, you don't have to worry about it. You literally don't have to worry about it. Why don't they have a nutrition label on the side of your bunch of spinach when you go pick it up from the produce section?
Good question.
It's not that much in there. It'd be like, 0.01, it's not in there, right? So that's why the produce doesn't necessarily have it. And the stuff that does is almost always processed. Very few things that we're just going to eat, that come naturally super salted. Very few things. So, everybody is different. There are some people right here in the United States, some of them are my patients, who I'm asking to eat more salt. And those people have a different physiology. Those people's blood pressure is super low. When they stand up, their heart rate goes so fast. They feel faint. They do faint. Those people are different than everybody else. Do you see how my recommendation that sounds really hearty and wholesome does not apply to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what I'm saying. Don't consume the stuff only on this podcast and then go do it because you don't know if it's going to harm you or help you unless you know what your profile is. So we've got to start by hiring a doctor that's going to help us. Hey, here's all this stuff out here. What about me? How do I apply this? Does it even apply at all? And if I do, how do I do it? That's the way to go.
So you made an interesting comment on just the fruits and vegetables and how there's a natural reduction in sodium when you consume a lot of those. Clearly, those foods are high in potassium. The RDA for potassium is very high, right? I think it's
3,500.
Very high. So is potassium the missing link to longevity and the lack of it in our diets, do you think?
Well, it's certainly the missing link for some people. And if there is, I sound like I'm just saying the same thing over and over again, but it's so important. There are people, if they eat a bunch of potassium, they'll be in trouble. With that being said, if you eat naturally, mostly plants, your diet is replete with potassium and magnesium, two of the ions that counteract the effect of sodium. Okay, it's amazing. So, for example, I sometimes ask my patients, all right, pull out your cell phone. Pull out your cell phone. Yeah, pull out your cell phone in the visit. Go to the apps that kind of you can log your food. So one of them is MyFitnessPal. I'm not selling MyFitnessPal, but it's one of them. MyFitnessPal, I tell them, hey, listen, there's a bunch of ads on there, but I want you to just do something for 2 weeks. I want you to log every single thing that you put in your mouth at the end of the day. So it doesn't become a social media thing where you're just like tinkling with the thing at work, right? Oh, I'm supposed to be on a conference call. What did I have for lunch? So you wait until the end of the day. You're about to plug your phone in. Go to MyFitnessPal. What did I eat and drink that day? Do it for 2 weeks. Don't worry about it. At the end of the 2 weeks, go back to the nutrients, the nutrition information. And you go to that page and you'll see how much potassium is in your normal day to day. You will see the over under. If I'm way below 3,500, it's going to tell me. If I'm there or above, it's going to tell you. And it is mind boggling how almost everybody I have do that exercise fails when it comes to potassium. Okay.
Wow.
because we're not getting. And where's that potassium? So then I send them, and we can all do this. Google potassium-rich foods, not a potassium pill, not right. No, that's not what I said. Potassium-rich foods. So you go to potassium-rich foods, and what comes up? A bunch of plants.
Yeah.
Fruit and vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes. And there, you can get a little potassium from muscle cells, but that's not going to be a dense source of it. So you see why all roads come back to Rome. Like we all are saying, the ions, the nutrients, the macronutrients that are really good for us, they live largely, densely in plants. That's where that comes from. It's not like, we're just an echo chamber. That's where all of the positive things live. So then we get to turn somebody's diet, because I also have them give their diet a grade before we do this. Give your diet a grade. Everybody says, B, right? Nobody's giving themselves, well, unless the people are being honest. C, D, F. And some people is eat, fast food all day. They'll give themselves an F.
I have a feeling there's a lot of Fs out there.
Lots of Fs, especially, the younger, group, right? 30s and youngers.
Yeah.
And younger. And it's eye-opening when they see that. And they're saying, oh, I got to change this. There's no vitamin C in there. There's no, and they change it and log it again, and it's night and day. Then what happens? They lose 10 pounds. They feel sharper. They sleep better. That's the answer. You say, well, then what is one of the things for longevity? What's going on with these blue zones? What are they doing? They're eating a ton of plants, man, and a variety of them. Why shouldn't we do it? What are the side effects? Well, if you don't have a kale problem like me and you stay away from kale, there are none. There are no side effects.
Yeah. Wow. So talk about useful labs people can run. A lot of our audience on this podcast manage their own health, and they're very proactive, and that's just the kind of proactive minded people they are. So what are some labs people can request their physician to get, or jump on some website and order some labs that can monitor their heart health?
So I like the idea of people having their own agency and getting labs, especially when insurance is a disaster and all of those things.
That's another podcast.
It really is. Don't get me started. But it almost sounds like I'm, selling, going to see a doctor. I am actually selling. I don't apologize for that, by the way, Mike.
Okay.
Because I want you to take that information and then go do it. For example, let's say we all went to the tax code. Mm-hmm. And we said, I'm trying to figure out how I can save on my taxes. The tax code is determined by the laws that are generated by Congress. And then those are the guys and gals who generate the code, essentially it's translated into a code. And then the practitioners of that code are the people who prepare our taxes. They're the accountants, right? Boy, no. I want to go save on taxes. I'm going to go to the tax code, figure out what it is. Oh, I see these 3 things that I've really never heard of before. Let me try to put this into my, taxes this year. Yeah, you might be able to. First of all, it's going to take a long time. It's making a lot of assumptions that you understand all of the ins and outs of all the craziness that goes into the jargon that's in there. Attorneys say stuff like pursuant to. Like nobody talks like that. So what else is in there? It would be likened to you trying to go save significantly on your taxes, going to the tax code yourself without a translator. So you can go get the labs. I want you to read the tax code, but my accountant says, come back to me. Let me tell you why that applies or doesn't. And if you don't believe me, go to another opinion. There it is. Go get your labs, then go sit with a practitioner whom you trust, which means you got to hire one.
Yeah.
A commercial break. That's the relationship. It's not this paternalistic relationship.
Yeah.
It's you hired me. I work for you. I'm the doctor. I work for you. Not I'm the doctor. Do what I say. With that being said, I'm going to go and see what they say about it. They still work for me. So if I decide that I don't want to do that and it sounds like poppycock, I'm not going to do it. But at least I'm going to go get their expertise because their expertise is deep and wide. Mine isn't. Okay. So go get your labs. Here are the labs I want people to be thinking about for cardiovascular system. You want just your regular comprehensive metabolic panel.
Okay.
You want to know what a complete blood count is. You want to know what your hemoglobin A1C is. You want to know what your basic lipid panel is. Start there. What is my cholesterol panel? Don't get too much into the nuance of particles yet until you know that that one looks good or you have a plan to make it look good. I want people also to be thinking when they do get advanced lipid panels to get something called lipoprotein A. It is not traditionally a part of your lipid panel, but is where we think a lot of risk lies in people who otherwise look healthy. We heard about Bob Harper, the trainer, long time ago, right? Remember this guy from
I do, yeah.
Biggest Loser? We're like, what in the world? He had a heart attack in the gym.
Yeah.
The story goes that there was a paramedic that was next to him, started to do CPR. Well, the reason why a guy who looked like he does could have that kind of a massive heart attack, that's massive, was because he had a very high LPA, what we call lipoprotein A. Go get your lipoprotein A checked. If it's high, you are barreling yourself into a cardiologist's office, right?
Wow.
Start with the basics, then build from there. Women should be getting iron levels, not exclusively, but mostly, especially women that are pre-menopausal, having cycles. Iron levels, right? Vitamin D. Every human being on the planet, well, that's extreme, but at least in the United States, should have a vitamin D. Vitamin D, I read one place, is a cofactor for about a third of our genes. We got a ton of genes, and if vitamin D is essential for the operation of a third of those gene products, boy, we better have a replete vitamin D. I want you to know what your vitamin D is, and I want you to have a sense of what your thyroid level is. That's a great place to start. So my thyroid level in the form of something called TSH. Let's start there. If those are amazing, then you can start getting really nuanced. What are my inflammatory markers? What are we can really start to get out there, but let somebody help coach you along.
And I like how you included stuff. When I prepared that question before, I was expecting to hear just heart-specific stuff, cholesterol. I like that you looked at the whole body. I like that whole body approach. I don't know if I've ever heard a cardiologist ask about thyroid numbers. Is that important? Obviously. I mean, that's your metabolism. So I appreciate that whole body approach and how you looked at different things, A1C and these different factors that some cardiologists may gloss over, no?
Yeah, no, I think it is. I often examine, not often, I almost always examine people's thyroid, at least when I meet them for the first time. There is this link. Let me just say it this way. There's no system in your body that's just sort of sitting out in the silo. Yeah. So although a doctor might be honed in, like an orthopedist is not going to feel your liver, okay? That's not what he does. Yeah. Or she does, right? But it all is connected. So you want somebody who thinks in a connected way. That might be your primary care doctor. That might be a cardiologist that's wacky like me. But I feel the thyroid because very often folks have thyroid nodules or thyroid cancer, and they don't know it. How does thyroid cancer feel? What symptom do you get? There's none. So I can't tell you how many thyroids I feel, and we see nodules that have to be, biopsied and taken care of and all that stuff. The thyroid is like what happens to your laptop. When you have it plugged in and you're at the Starbucks, or I'm not selling Starbucks either, but you're at the cafe and you want to take your laptop with you to the restroom and you don't want to leave it on a table. So you unplug the laptop. What happens to the light? It dims down a bit, doesn't it?
Right.
Imagine that that's your thyroid. Your thyroid doesn't make the light come on, but the thyroid makes the light work better. The thyroid makes a lot of your systems work better. And that's why it's important to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. So tell me about your podcast.
Yeah. No, I'm really excited about the Health Mastery Cafe with Dr. Dave. Ding, that's me. I started it, as I said before, I started it in 2011. And it was just me, Mike, man. I'm cranking it out. I'm using this suite because I had just gotten an iMac at the time, and started recording it in a cafe in Chicago. The cafe was called Crew. It was downtown Chicago, near the Gold Coast, and that's where the name came from. I believe that we have to give people tools for mastery. We've heard Tony Robbins talk about mastery. Here, people talk about mastery. Mastering ourselves from the inside out is the most important thing that we can do. Health mastery is the most important thing on everybody's list. There's nothing more important than your health, is what I say on the podcast. And so, boy, I thought it was fun to do it in a cafe, so I started in a cafe. Started audio, and then we had a little hiatus where I wasn't really doing it because I kind of am like a doctor. I was busy, and I couldn't do it all myself and be consistent.
And then solo episodes are hard work, right?
Man, it's so hard, right?
Yeah.
I was using Logic Express. I don't know if you remember Logic. Now Logic is some big monstrosity. Like the music people are using Logic now.
Yeah.
And I had to learn Logic, like how to edit, how to cut, how to trim. And I'm pretty proud of myself after it took me hours and hours. Talk about the 10,000 hour rule, right?
That's intense.
Hours.
I know Logic. That's intense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But they had a little baby Logic. You know, it's like Carl's Jr., right? So it was that was a terrible metaphor given that we're talking about preventive health. But it was a pared down app, and I was able to learn that one a little bit easier. And they had just changed the interface so it looked a little bit more like iMovie. It kind of had a little bit more, but anyway, so we'd use that and you know, like all of the things, man, you know, the mics and learning all that stuff. And it turns out that was really helpful for me down the road. When I'm shooting my podcast now, I know what to think about sound. I know what to think about light because I was shooting all of those things were important. Anyway, that's not what you asked me. The Health Mastery Cafe is designed to teach you how to do that, to master your health. We are bringing on guests from every single possible aspect of health you can think of, from the inside, psycho-emotional health, mental health, to the outside, all the way down to sexual health. We had a guest recently, and he got down into these taboo topics. Guess what? Can we just get professionals to be able to break through the taboo and the stigmata of certain things and give us information that we're going to go look at TikTok for if we don't do it? So that's what we're doing. And I'm inviting everybody to go to Health Mastery Cafe on Instagram. Join us. Health Mastery Cafe on YouTube, which is where the full episodes live. And we're going to have some more fun, Mike. I hope to have you on.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, it'd be great to come hang out with you. And I'll make sure to include all that in the show notes as well, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thanks for being here. I really appreciate you making the time and hanging out with us. It was fun.
Mike, it was a great conversation with you. Thank you for being a fantastic host. And the questions matter the most. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for this edition. You guys know where to find us, MikeCPodcast.com. Subscribe to us, give us a like, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks. Take care.
The Mike C. Podcast.